Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Zenway podcast. Today I have a very interesting conversation. I'm super excited. For those of you who have been following me for a while, you know that on this podcast I talk everything about career, tech, and also in terms of leadership as well. Today, we're going to talk about the tech stuff because I have someone, Steph, on the other side of the ocean from the Philippines. She is someone that I totally geek out with as well, right? So she is in the thick and thin of applying machine learning and AI for clients as well. So without further ado, I'm just gonna pass the time over to Steph, to have a quick introduction before we jump into today's conversation, which is about AI.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anway. I'm Stef Sy. I'm the founder and CEO of Thinking Machines. I've been working in the Zoom. There you go.
Yeah.
One thing AI cannot quite fix yet. So I'm actually using an AI camera right now, the Opal C1 camera. And it's really been interesting to see AI embedded into everyday life in all sorts of places. And sometimes it doesn't work. This is supposed to be an AI autofocus. And I think that was a perfect example right there of how sometimes it's still a learning machine. So I've been working in AI, or back when I was studying it, I was still called statistical learning. And you can see why AI sounds like a much sexier name than statistical learning for maybe 12, 15 years now. And in that 15 years, AI has gone from being, there was an AI winter in the 60s where everybody thought, oh, we're only one summer away from achieving sentient machines, to realizing that those methods they were using that were quite limited, to this AI winter in like the 80s and 90s. And then in the 2000s, once we had quite a lot more training data sets, just a huge amount of training data sets, found some new methods, neural network methods they were hypothesized a couple of decades ago, but only with much, much better chips, GPU chips, could you really unlock the full potential of neural network methodologies. And then you started seeing all these digital channels, all the ways that you could get AI in front of people, deliver AI to people in the form of like cameras, phones, websites, like every delivery mechanism possible is there now. So we have actually seen AI in the last 5 years, I would say. In the last 10 years, it's gone from being very niche to quite mainstream and embedded into all your digital experiences. In the last 5 years, I've really seen AI go through this whole hype cycle, right? Of everything is AI, even when it's not AI, when it's rule-based models. And in the last 5 months, AI through ChatGPT and AI through these new types of large language models hit this new, really interesting paradigm shift where you can now have conversations with AI models. So if you think about it, 10 years ago to train an AI model, or 5 years ago to train an AI model, you have to take a lot of training data. You have to be somewhat of a computer science expert yourself, or somebody who is capable of taking a machine learning method, taking data sets, training that model, and then being able to deliver that model, which is usually like a very narrow, compact model. So for example, think of audience segmentation, or think of Facebook recommender feed, just one specific task. You have to put a lot of work in. Now with large language models, I think it's fascinating and different because these are pre-trained language models that you can give instructions to in natural English as if you were talking to a smart college intern, and it will actually perform the tasks that you tell it to. Now, whether it's correct or not correct is, I think, the topic of this podcast. But I think that's very interesting because AI hit a new level of accessibility to just everyday users very recently. So it's been really exciting to have my career be part of this whole very exciting journey. I must say it was kind of dumb luck to take statistics in college. And it's led to a very enjoyable career so far. It looks like I'm still going to have a job, even with AI, 10 years from now. So let's hope I still have a job 20 years from now.
Well, I mean, looking at what you've been doing, I think it's without a doubt that you are definitely in a field that is super exciting and definitely with a future, right? And this is why I really liked conversation with you, simply because you hit on a few things that I think we're quite aligned on. You talk about how there's quite a lot of technologies out there. They're using rule-based and they call themselves AI, but that they're actually not, right? So, and in terms of the different, in terms of the different, different types of technology, you talk about how you started your career in, statistical learning and learning about engineering in Stanford. Let's go a little bit back there, right? You had the opportunity to work in Silicon Valley. What was that atmosphere like, at the hub of all these innovation minds, right? At that point of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I lived there and worked there for 7 years in the 2000s, kind of like 2007 to 2014. And the biggest thing I picked up in that era is that if I compare it to maybe Philippines, definitely Malaysia, maybe also risk tolerance is much higher there. And so I want to come back to this idea of learning, right? Because
Yeah.
how does a person learn? A person learns first by taking in some lessons, maybe some curriculum, or observing their surroundings. They form a hypothesis in their mind. They act on that hypothesis, and based on what happens, your kid like tries to stand up, falls over. They learn how to walk by falling over and over again until they figure out like what it actually takes to get up. And so the learning cycle for starting businesses in Silicon Valley is very, very, very robust. There's a lot of, think about it this way. Even when you're in college, even when I was in college there was a very accepted culture and practice of trying to start a startup, failing, and you would not be punished for that failure, which means that learning cycles really go fast. Everybody has the courage and daring to learn. Everybody has a lot of tries at bat. Every try at bat gives you more knowledge, more experience. Whereas when I moved back to the Philippines to start thinking machines in around 2015, the bar to start a startup is much higher. To get any kind of investment, anyone behind you, you can't just come up with an idea. You really have to have so much more evidence, so much more conviction that it's going to work. And most startups still fail, It takes longer for startups to fail. And when they fail, it takes longer for those founders to get the capital, not just the financial capital, but there's an emotional capital. To start a startup requires courage, and social capital. To start a startup also requires that you have potential co-founders who believe in you and your mission, potential clients who will say like yes to trying to be even your alpha customer. So the financial, emotional, and social capital it takes to try again and again was lower, which means you just don't have people trying over and over again. And then you see how this leads to a cycle, right? The more times you try things faster, the faster you learn, the more you improve. And the worse you are at doing this, the more you'll lag behind. And things have definitely improved and changed. And a lot of people say a lot of things about, okay, since San Francisco, Silicon Valley has a lot of money. It's a lot of true things, right? They already have a lot of money. They have a great educational, like a university system. All the VCs are already there. All the every asset they already have is already there. But let's not overweight on that, right? Because you're not going to suddenly have $200 billion of investment money show up in Manila tomorrow. But what you can start doing is to like fix this learning loop and learning cycle so that we are a better place to be worth investing in. I think that's a little bit of a ramble. I think what I really mean to say is that the attitude around failure was much, much healthier in San Francisco. And that just created that attitude counts for a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a very valuable insight actually. And it's not I guess a comparison that I've heard a lot actually, right? Because a lot of times they talk about the difference being really that you have a very high concentration of talent and capital, but they don't talk about actually what that actually allowed was precisely what you mentioned, right? This acceptance of being able to kind of try multiple times and fail multiple times. Whereas in the Asian context and very much in Malaysia as well, the shame of failing is very high, and you're not gonna talk about your failures as much, right? So that doesn't allow a lot of times where you're able to really cycle through as much as possible.
I forget there's a lot of scammers out there too. I feel like okay, honestly, in the Philippines, especially when crypto Sorry to whoever's listening if you got caught up in one of these startups.
You caught us straight.
You got us straight. There's a
Yeah.
lot of startups in the Philippines
Yeah.
where I was just trying to figure out, like, are they good people who are just
Mhm.
young and early to this, or are they people who are scammers and who are trying to just
Mm.
like scam potential investors and customers out of money? Because we're
Yeah.
genuinely people, especially raising for like crypto concepts
Mm.
or
Yeah.
yeah, like in the Philippines, who ended up like stealing people's money and running away with it, right? And that
Yeah.
definitely erodes the sense of trust of potential customers and
Yeah.
investors. There are also scammers in San Francisco, but the thing is, because failure is so much more openly talked about there
Yeah.
versus here, I think that when
They
sometimes scammers
normalize the
get away
risk,
with
or they
doing
took
it,
it.
they get away with it like 3 or 4
Yeah.
times because the people
Yeah.
who they scammed like don't want to talk about it. It's
Yeah.
you don't really know who's tried something and it failed
Yeah.
in a good way versus a bad way. So
Right.
it's a
They
really
probably
environment.
took that risk into account as well, right? In terms of there are potential that when you invest into something, there's probably a 10-15% you're gonna get scammed. The other 80% probably they're gonna fail.
Yeah. Oh man. So 10% scam, 80% fail, 10% success. That's the
Yeah.
ratio.
Yeah. In Malaysia as well, I think it gets even more sensitive because I think the government is trying all sorts of ways to kind of prop up the ecosystem, and
Mm.
therefore what that meant is that there are actually some government set up VCs or investing vehicles through the government as well,
Oh.
and when those fail, they become even more under scrutiny
Then it's
because you are taking
national
taxpayers' money.
failures. Oh, it's taxpayers' money.
Yeah, so
Oh.
it's under a little bit more spotlight and stuff like that. Thankfully, those investment vehicles, minus the major scandal one that also appears on Netflix recently. The one after that, it's I think it's more well run and a little bit more thought through in terms of partnering with VCs that's actually done that before, and and things like that, right? But I totally understand in terms of like why in Asia it's difficult because there's just not a lot of funding in the first place. Number two, there are scams. So many reasons stacks up against us, right? So it's quite interesting how there are still courageous people like yourself that's starting trying to kind of beat the odds as well for the environment. So leading to that, right? I was thinking, I never had a chance to really ask you this, but what got you started thinking machines in the first place? What kind of problems did you wanted to solve when you started thinking machines?
Yeah. So thinking machines is my attempt to solve two problems at the same time. I I started thinking machines in about 2015, and there were two problems in Southeast Asia that I really wanted to figure out how to crack. On one side, and on one side, organizations are in the Philippines, I think in many other places in Southeast Asia, pretty early in their data transformation journey. Everybody is thinking, executives are thinking, I need to be able to use data to make my organization better. I've been hearing that this thing called AI is changing the game and making a lot of money for a lot of companies all over the world. How do I do that? How do I become a
Yeah.
more data transformed organization? And within a lot of these companies, there's also the second layer, this very interesting subterranean layer of how do we change the culture of this company to become more data driven? A lot of companies
Yeah.
are not. A lot of companies are driven by what does the most senior person say. A lot of companies are driven by, and they still work, right? Like those companies work, but many organizations who are not data driven are trying to understand like how can I use data to make my company better, and underneath there is how do I use data to make decisions, and quietly underneath that, it basically is saying how can I change my organization so that it's not just the number one or number two, number three person making decisions, but how can I make sure our middle managers, our frontliners are able to make decisions for the benefit of our customers? And that I think is like a very interesting cultural, massive change in cultural dynamic in a lot of these organizations. So on one hand, you have these organizations that desire to change. They don't know how, they don't have the talent and capability to do so. On the other hand, there's this other problem I kept seeing where there's a lot of people who wanted to become data scientists. I met a lot of people who wanted to be data engineers, who wanted to figure out like what are these new jobs and new careers? How can I be ready for them? How can I, how can I think at one point Harvard Business Review put out this like horrible headline: "Data scientist is the sexiest job of the 20th century." That headline has caused me a lot of problems because it definitely oversold. Definitely oversold the job. But a lot of students are asking, or young professionals and students are asking, how can I do this? But they cannot become very senior because at some point you just hit the limit of what you can learn online. You completely hit the limit of what you can do from online coursework, and you really just need experiential learning. You need to learn and achieve seniority and learn your judgment by doing data projects. And so both these people are really stuck because these young professionals can't like find jobs that help them elevate their data skills. These organizations don't need entry-level professionals. They need people who can like help them conceptualize, redesign, and take them down the data transformation journey. So I started Thinking Machine as like Thinking Machines. We're a data consulting firm. We really specialize in taking both sides of this, training training people in data, this whole swath of data skills, and training them how to work in teams to do transformation projects together with our partners, which unlocks like even more interesting, difficult data and AI problems for the next level of team to work with, and you end up with this positive cycle. You'll hear me talk about feedback loops a lot and cycles a lot because I really believe in the power of systems thinking and positive feedback loops in systems. Very quiet, small changes compounded over a long period of time really turned the wheel for me, and that's my philosophy of work, and that's what Thinking Machines is here to help solve.
Yeah, and that's perfect because we, in terms of the second sub layer, right? I was fortunate enough to study a course called data science and also machine learning for leaders, right? And they talk about how machine learning and data science is actually a leadership issue. Why? It's because of the very reason you talked about, right? You want to use data, but in terms of really planning for analytics and planning for such transformation, not a lot of people talk about the what kind of underlying factors that requires. It's not just about looking at a fancy dashboard, figuring out what you want on the dashboard as well, right? Because there's a lot of organizations that also told us when I was at Accenture as well to talk about how they have a lot of data, but what they really have is a lot of compliance data. Basically, you did it, you do this, you do that, but that's not very meaningful for you to be able to unlock the value that you have, right? But how do you actually train, you mentioned about, the fifth person, the sixth person, or even the person on the shop floor to be able to recognize what type of data will be interesting for you to be able to then unlock the potential of the organization or help yourself do the job much better, right? Which is why I'm pretty excited about our use case today that we're going to talk about, which is also related to when it comes to culture. There's only one department that is seemingly always in charge, which is HR.
Poor HR, HR. They have to do everything.
They have to do everything, including changing the hearts and minds of individuals. But jokes aside, it's really a big, L&D problem as well, right? In terms of learning how, human resource professionals, I keep on talking about, I'm not the expert as well. How do I then, change the mindset of so many different people and make people learn so quickly, right? How do I help adopt different mindsets as well when, I'm also still learning as well? And I like the concept you talk about, which is, just in time learning, right? It is a concept that I believe that it's more natural way of us learning, right? For example, like if I were to kind of wanting to learn how to cook a scrambled egg, I would then Google 5 minutes before I cook a scrambled egg, instead of learning how to do a scrambled egg months before and then forget about it later, right? So I think a more meaningful way and a way forward is actually just in time learning. We, for this show, you have prepared something very special. I know that this is supposedly a podcast, but I'm going to try to narrate as much as possible what's happening on the screen as well. So Stef, you have been so gracious to share what the Thinking Machine team has been building, which is actually a large language model lab as well, right? So tell us a little bit about this, what we're trying to demonstrate today as well.
Yeah, so oh man, it's so funny that you talked about HR as the team that's in charge of all the cultural transformation, because in a lot of ways, building culture is harder than building technology. Culture involves people. People need to be convinced. People are the hardest. You can't just press a button and somebody's behavior changes, right? You have to bring them through behavioral change.
Yeah.
One thing I find really interesting with the use of AI as large language models is you can go from giving somebody, so typically the paradigm for training a new manager, let's say, is you put them through, maybe you put them through a training course, 5-day seminar. On day one is here's how you conduct your one-on-ones. Here's the company's like performance metrics. Day two is like here's how you handle difficult situations, and here's every policy manual and where to find, maybe it's some knowledge-based policy manual for if you want to promote somebody, you do this. If you want to put somebody on a performance regularization plan, performance improvement plan, you do that, and so on. And then when you're doing the job, if you're lucky, you don't need to put anybody on a performance improvement plan for a while. After 8 months, you realize, I have a superstar working for my team, and I really want to get this guy promoted. How do I do that again? Like, how do I make a good case for that? And you don't remember. You have to go back. You have to look. You ask your manager for some advice, but your director is probably super busy, has 15 minutes for you, gives you bare bones advice, and like moves on. And you're thinking like, my God. So a lot of first-time managers, myself included, the first time I was managing people, you just had to learn the hard way. And the hard way is not just hard for us. It's hard for people who work for us. And what more if, as a middle manager, you are trying to push like organizational change in how you set goals, how you use data. What I think is really interesting with large language models is you as an HR team, you can create just-in-time coaches, like on conversations available at any time at a very high resolution way for anybody in your organization to access. So when we were talking to companies, we heard two main concerns. One is companies were very, very hesitant to have their data leave their organization. They're just really scared of what is OpenAI going to do with this data? What I want to make sure it's like managed and controlled inside of my organization. And two, they wanted more ability to share apps inside of their organization. So if I write a really good conversational AI assistant, you just don't want to start talking with a black box LLM all the time. You almost want HR to train somebody and say, you are an executive coach working for me, Stef, and Thinking Machines. Here are the rules and values of our organization. When you coach somebody, stick to these rules and values no matter what happens, right? So we then built this product called LLM Labs. It's actually really been really useful for a lot of our clients where this exists as a private, secure instance inside of their enterprise environment. We run a training course with them so they can build their own AI assistants. And I think it's been very powerful because the kind of AI assistants people can build are conversational in nature. And so here's an example of one of practicing client dialogue, right? So if I launch that, the HR team, the coaching team inside of our organization has already preloaded this GPT 3.5 model with a lot of instructions on what it's supposed to do, tone and format. And so if I'm a junior colleague...
On the top left side, I see that there is this goal, which is basically, what the HR team wants the language model to behave like, what kind of outcome it's looking at, right?
The kind of outcome it's looking, the kind of instructions, to what degree. So the HR team, so in this case, right, we have some junior people joining our company, and we want them to learn how to become client ready. And talking to clients is very scary. The first year you do it even. So this coach, and you can't cover every single scenario when you're talking to your manager. You absolutely just cannot. But what you can do is you can have an LLM coach that your managers have like preset with these are the kinds of ways of thinking we care about as an organization. So
should I prepare for my first pitch? Okay.
So if you forget, right? So if you are preparing for your first pitch, this coach will tell you what to do, how to research, know the product and service, anticipate objections. What if I get no response? Is that good? After presenting. So a lot of these questions, which maybe you're too paise or you're too embarrassed to ask your boss, you can ask it and say, Interesting. What happens if the client is completely silent after the
Yeah.
presentation? So the coach says, in this case, might not be a good sign. Number one, don't panic. Number two, ask open-ended questions. Number three, practice active listening. Let's continue
Right.
the role play.
Right.
And now it's like telling you, okay, what am I going to do or say? I will.
Yeah.
Let me give it a thing. Let me give it a wrong answer, and let's actually see what it does. So
Right.
this client dialogue coach is trying to role play with me now
Right.
as a potential client, and I pitched, and complete silence from the other end. What should I do or say? I will repeat my pitch. So it's
Okay.
saying, nope, don't do that. Here's what you should do. Here's a few suggestions. Seek clarification. Ask for concerns.
It's doing it very
offer
nicely
alternatives.
it's doing it very nicely, maybe much better than, a lot of unfortunately middle managers would respond when you actually give a wrong answer, right? So it will actually reduce a lot of anxiety for new staff to make a mistake as well.
Yeah, so this is really useful because very often when you are a busy manager and you're handling a lot of new people, your time is also very stretched thin, and it's very tempting. It's very tempting to just tell the person, "You should do this. You should do this. You're so stupid. Just do that, that, that." And when you're in that mode, that's not a coaching mode. The person who's receiving it might do the right thing in the short term because they'll just do exactly what you told them to do. But their comprehension, their understanding, how they process that feedback might not necessarily be there. And so six months later, you're wondering, wow, like all these juniors, like why aren't they capable of doing these things? Like I have to spend so much time on coaching and training. So this is supposed to be a tool, a conversational tool that works. As you can see, right? It's instead of just a training PDF that you give to a junior person that tells them what they should do. Now you're forcing them to think. It's just-in-time learning. And it's very, very customized to exactly the scenario that they've just faced. And I think I can. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what I like about it is really that because on the left-hand side, you are able to actually you define the tone and format as well, right? Because a lot of times when it comes to such cases, especially when it comes to client-facing stuff, you have one or two superstar reps that are able to handle, clients really well. But then you tend to think, how do I replicate that, right? So, you want to find a consistent tone, a consistent way that you engage with customers. And this will allow you to be able to do that training consistently and, objectively as well, So I think this is perfect because, you're now able to scale that superstar team that you have because, you're now then able to teach the tone as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think, very useful because people learn best when it's interactive. But the one thing that doesn't really scale is somebody's time and attention. This is also super useful because, how do I put this? I know for sure that there are some days when I am like my best, most optimistic, most gung-ho self, ready to like train and teach my team. But there are some days where I'm just tired and stressed and I just want to get things over with, right? So if I can take my best self and my best advice and always have it available for people, I think that's a good win for everybody. So this has been a really useful tool for us at TM for training people on how to talk. So you can see how I gave a good question and the large language model said, "Excellent, you transitioned smoothly by directly engaging me. Now here is my feedback and tips."
Right. We can always program this to have like different types of clients for it to role play, right? Because,
Yes.
you can have like difficult clients, you can have like, very problematic responses, different types of scenario as well, right?
Yeah, because at this point, right, we've seen so many different things. Anybody who's senior anywhere, you've just encountered all sorts of challenges. So once we take those stories, and typically how we train our juniors is when they hit that particular challenge, we can explain to them how we managed it, what they should think and do. But here, you can almost pre-bake what happens when a customer is completely silent. What happens if they're overly enthusiastic but suddenly asking for way too much from you in terms of like, you don't even know if there's any willingness to buy. What happens if they go silent? What happens and they come back after like 6 months of silence? How do you handle that? So all those scenarios you can already bake into potential practices that you set as the HR team. And the nice thing is I've done some really corny training where it's like multiple choice. And the funny thing about multiple choice is that it's always so obvious what the correct answer is. Like you're barely even thinking.
Yeah.
This pushes you into a much more natural format.
No, I agree. I think it forces you to type out what you would need to say, and that needs to make sense as well, right? So that in itself, I think it's a practice as well. I'm curious in terms of at this juncture, right? Is it, I guess, from a HR practitioner perspective, is it able to then help me kind of like maybe think about different scenarios that I might want to coach my team members on, right? Because I'm thinking like, okay, this is all great. I obviously, me as a HR practitioner, I need to help set this up as well, right? Because it's a sandbox, it's what I want it to be. So I was wondering in terms of like from a HR professional perspective, what do I need to do, right, to be able to make this coach as effective as possible? Right?
You need to learn how to write good instructions. So you need to learn how to write good instructions. And the good thing is it doesn't involve programming, but you do need to understand what is inside a large language model. What can it do and what can't it do out of the box, right? How truthful is it? How, because you don't want a large language model to start telling your team things that are completely not true about your company, right? So how do you ensure truth? How do you evaluate these models? And the nice thing is we've been using this product inside of TM for a while and with our clients, and you'll see like a lot of the AI assistants that have been built were built by the HR team, the high performance habits, developing L&D activities. I think one of them just showed me a new app, which is how to create smart goals.
Smart goals, right?
Yeah. Inside of the organization, and that's all. These are all people without computer science background, but we've sat with them through like almost maybe like 12 hours of training and coaching them on how to write good instruction based assistance. I don't know how deeply you want to go into this topic, but I think like large language models are super interesting because they feel like magic sometimes, but they're not. They're not magic. There's just another form of technology.
Maybe let's start with, I guess maybe the first question is really that how does it learn, right? You talk about at the top of the show in terms of like the mode of learning, and everybody has a process and everybody has a way of going through the different cycles as well. And obviously, in terms of the machine themselves have to go through different cycles as well, right? So how do machines actually learn, right? How can some machine that essentially recognizes ones and zeros, have this organic sense of learning and growing as well, right? So maybe we can start with that, and then the second part would be that what's the limitations of this, so that we can learn how to trust it as well, right?
Okay, so how do these machines learn? First, that's a huge one. That in itself is like several PhD theses worth of work, So these large language models, like oversimplification, like hyper oversimplification. The way you interact with it is that imagine that you are talking to somebody who's overconfident fresh graduate from a university. Right. Will absolutely never admit to you. So he's applying for a job or she's applying for a job, and they really want this job. And any question you ask is always, yes, ma'am, I know exactly the answer to that, even if they don't exactly know the answer. So they're always just going to say yes. And they're very well educated. They did go to school.
Speak well, right? Good grammar.
Good grammar. Very confident. Kind of knows enough to BS you. Knows enough about a lot of topics to sound like roughly correct.
Right.
So you have to, when you talk to this fresh grad large language model, you have to keep in mind that if it's general knowledge, if it's stuff that in general is known and accepted, they'll know it. But if it's specific knowledge about your company, if it's specific knowledge about any specific knowledge, the more niche it is, the less likely they are to know it. So if you ask them who's the president of the USA, they're going to correctly say Joe Biden because everybody knows who the president of the USA is. But if you ask them who is the who is the current like senior manager for analytics at my company? Not they're gonna make up a name. They're not gonna say I don't know. They're
Right.
just gonna make up some name.
Yeah, I forgot. They're overly. They must say yes. I need
They
to
must
show
say
you I know.
yes.
Yeah.
I need to show you I know so that you hire me. I need to show you they got some bad advice. You know, they got some
Right.
bad advice from their
Yeah.
from college
Right.
that they always have to be as
Right.
optimistic as possible. So
Right.
what do they actually know, right? So the
Mm.
reason why they know who Joe Biden is, but they don't know
Right.
who you are, is that the way companies train large language models is they have taken almost every piece of written text available on the internet, and they have put it into a type of neural network model. Neural network models are very, very good at establishing patterns. And patterns can be semantic patterns, meaning meaning-based patterns. They can be any kind of pattern, visual patterns, audio patterns. Neural nets are really, really good at taking in like huge quantities of information and being able to locate relevant pieces of information roughly near each other to establish an understanding of overall patterns. So the more information you feed into it, the more patterns you get. The flip side of this is most of those patterns are correct, but some of those patterns are incorrect, and you just do not know as a person. You just like don't know. One, two is so what do they know is anything on the public internet is probably in there. Anything is on the private anything that's private information is probably not in there. That's the first thing of what do they know. The second thing is when you are conversing with these models, what do you get? So what you're not getting is you're not getting a lookup. You are not getting a lookup. Everybody right now thinks when they're talking to ChatGPT, it's like talking to Google. That's not true because Google by heart, by nature, is a lookup model. Information is indexed and it is trying to point you to some point of information in here. Large language models are generative models. Generative models will take your question, try to figure out like where is the potential space of the answer, and they'll make up a piece of data that's not inside. It's not necessarily things they know. They'll just make up a piece of information that feels like it fits the pattern really well. And most of the time it's correct. That's why it's such a source of like mind-blowing, like it's making connections and relationships that feel very human, feel very natural. It's like completely mind-blowing. But because it's not looking up information, if you're asking for accuracy, you're really not going to get it most of the time. So you'll see it's really good at conceptual understanding. It's very bad at like looking up precise pieces of information.
Right. And in terms of, well, you mentioned something very, very interesting, right? Around if using the same analogy, I'm speaking to a very confident fresh graduate that wants the job and
Yes.
will never tell me I don't know. Is there a situation where, because I've seen ChatGPT do this as well, right? Like for example, if you ask it about food safety questions, it will say things like, "I'm not a food safety officer, but here's what I think." You know, is that something
Yeah,
that I guess HR practitioners or even enterprises can kind of code it
that
in to make it behave such a way, right? Tell me when you're not sure.
exactly. Exactly. That's going to be our job. That's every AI practitioner, every company. Our job now is to take these overly confident fresh grads and put them through one more layer of finishing school, lecture them. If you don't know, just say you don't know. Give them the company's policy manual and say, memorize this, okay? If anybody asks you any questions about our company's policies, look it up here or say you don't know. Teach them. This is what it means to be working in the telecoms industry, or these are the rules and regulations of the Singaporean Ministry of Manpower. Memorize it. So in a nutshell, a lot of what my job is and my team's job is these days is to take these hyper confident fresh grads and to fine tune, and through engineering, model fine tuning, retrieval augmented generation, and improving the embeddings layer of these models, train it to be company specific representatives. So every company has access now to this massive army of fresh grads. You can call these fresh grads graduates from GPT or Llama 2, the open source model. So you have many, think of it in this terrible metaphor. I think this is actually not a bad metaphor. You have all these new universities spitting out fresh graduates, right? You have the Llama 2 grads, you have the GPT 3.5 grads, GPT 4 grads. And you as a company, you now have to add one more layer for enterprise application purposes of how do you fine-tune these models, train them to work inside your organization, add layers of instruction on top of that so they can be a HR employee, junior or coach, an HR coach inside of your company with your specific context. That's not so easy. Frankly, that is still like a lot of work from the professional side, but it's really entertaining. It's really interesting to see what these fresh grads can. They're very surprising, very pleasant to work with.
Good thing
Really,
is that they don't
the new
talk back,
job.
right?
They'll do stuff that sometimes, you know what? It's just as bad. Like sometimes they won't talk back at you, but they won't do what you tell them to do. You're like, but I told you to just tell the truth, and you didn't.
Right.
Why? And they're just like, whoa. So I have to look at the code and figure out, I don't know.
In terms of, I've read a few, I guess, concerns, right, in terms of biases. And I think, especially for the human resource area, for the HR area, this is extremely, I guess, center of the application use case, right? In terms of, because if we're going to teach them based on, past experiences that we have, in terms of how we actually think good performances and stuff like that, right? It's kind of like perpetuating, the mistakes we have done and the biases that we have done in the first place, right? So how do we then, have a balance as well, right? On the one hand, obviously, we don't want these confident graduates to, tell us things that are not true. But on the other hand, we are also limited by, what we deem as bias as not as well, right? So, what do you think our role is, or HR's role is, in terms of, helping to refine all these models, right? How do we spot for biases and all that kind of things, right?
Yeah. So spotting for biases is really interesting because inside of these large language models, I've seen some studies, and like when I try these models myself, I see it. Like they are because they're trained on everything available on the internet and human history. The internet is kind of not a stellar. If you look at some Reddit threads, some subreddits, you think, oh my God,
it's not very bright.
Is this what ChatGPT knows? Like, it's not very bright. It's not very moral sometimes. It's like you're thinking, wow, that was good advice in one thread and horrible advice in another thread. So what will ChatGPT tell you, the good advice or the bad advice, right?
Yeah. It doesn't know, right? I guess another layer of that is that
know.
it doesn't know quality, it doesn't know right or wrong, other than absolute facts, whether the earth is round or whether apple is red.
Well, sometimes it's not. If you feed it 10,000, 100 million books saying that the earth is flat, and you ask it, is the book earth flat? It's going to say, yeah, it's flat.
Oh. It's what you train it to be.
It's what you train it to be. So I think for the perspective of an HR professional,
right.
or anyone trying to build models on these things, we have to remember that you're getting a really sharp, you're getting a really sharp fresh grad. You have to first evaluate. You have to have a really good evaluation mechanism for what are the questions when we're talking about bias, right? Like breaking down, what does bias mean in your organization? In what scenarios and settings does bias come up? How do you then create an evaluation framework that you can consistently test a large language model on? I think in my experience, the QA dataset, the evaluation framework, has to come first. So you see where the benchmark is, where the baseline is of any model. And with any model, it's not going to perform exactly to your baseline. If any people watching or listening to this have been using ChatGPT for a while, you've noticed that ChatGPT keeps evolving a little bit and sometimes overly constrained, sometimes overly loose. And that's because OpenAI is trying to be responsive to humans saying, hey, ChatGPT shouldn't give bomb-making instructions to me just because I asked, right?
Yeah.
But you, as an HR organization, you have the ability to just say, my version of ChatGPT, my internal company version of ChatGPT, only allow it to answer this category of questions, don't allow it to answer anything else. Let's run it through my evaluation framework of like, when and how does it express and exhibit bias? Great. Now we know where it is. You can create something called an instruction, a set of instructions for you to fine tune it. So that is where you then This is a little bit different from just giving pure instructions. You need to fine tune and add a few more layers of knowledge to the model that you're using to control for bias, to get it to absorb the morals and standards and communicate the standards of your organization before letting it loose inside of your organization. That's pretty much why I recommend any enterprise use a custom version of GPT that they fine tune, because while as SME, I think if you're an SME, right, small business, you have the brain to look at ChatGPT's responses to you and say, that's not quite right. But like that really helps me get started, and you can overall just be more efficient. When you're an enterprise and you have 250 employees all doing the same customer service task or sales task, you might not necessarily have people who feel empowered to make that decision. They want something that's a little bit more fixed and certain that they can run with. And that's where I think the role of then the leadership team is to set the policies and express and have the AI express those policies properly.
Right. And are you able to, let's talk about that, I guess the framework and the baseline, right? Let's say, for example, I kind of know what questions I would ask myself to check for biases.
Yeah.
And since this is such a super learner, right, a fresh grad, can I not teach it also to talk about, when you evaluate this, I'd like you to also consider this type of parameters as well. Like, for example, in terms of, I guess, age, or, like gender, for example, when you see your own outputs, if it's going to be crossing this threshold, explain yourself, right? Why did you make this certain stuff, right? Are we able to teach it certain evaluation criteria to check itself, so to speak, right?
You can have two models. I've seen people try to do this in a couple of ways. I've seen people use two different models in conversation with each other. One is like to check, check and balance, right? Two models in conversation with each other. I've seen people try to give like a framework of instructions to one model and tell it like, these are my criteria for all of these criteria points. Every time you give an answer, please score it along these criteria points. I've also seen people, this is very fun. I saw one colleague of mine, I asked her to come up with what questions would you ask to see if a model is biased or not. And she's like, wait, I'm just going to ask Claude 2 right now. Give me 20 possible ways to, and I thought that was so funny and interesting. And that was super helpful too. Whichever method you choose though, I think that you need to have a human in the loop to be the person setting the finalized criteria for, can I trust this or not? Because the ultimate question comes down to trust. And I don't think people are at the point yet where they totally trust the AI model to self-police.
Absolutely.
They would rather trust a human, whether it's a human directly inside of the loop, or it's a human who set the criteria and standards sitting outside of the loop that the AI model has to abide by. That is what people are willing to trust right now.
Yeah. This is extremely fascinating. I think I can go, 2-3 hours just really talking to you about different use cases. I think, if you could, I think we've provided a lot of optimism in terms of why you should use it, and I guess a good enough ground as well. We're not talking about it's all rainbows and butterflies, right? We also talk about safeguards and all that kind of stuff, right? But I wanted to really also, maybe because you've been looking at the industry for so long and you've seen so many use cases, your team is brilliant. I worked with them before. I wanted to ask if you could tell a story that could provide optimism for this technology to get people to adopt it, right? What would that, if you could tell a story, what story would it be for an extra dose of sunshine,
Extra dose of sunshine. I love it. I am still a techno-optimist. I am still definitely somebody who's very optimistic about how technology can be used by people who aren't, especially by people who don't see themselves as computer scientists, people who don't see themselves as innovators. Maybe their mental image of themselves is like, I'm not very innovative, so what's going to happen to me in this world? And I really just want to share that we've been training people on how to write great large language model assistants and giving them access to LLM labs. And most of the people we train we deliberately said, don't give us people from your innovation teams, give us people from classically poor HR, finance, operations, they're kind of ignored in a lot of these like AI initiatives, right? Like
Mhm.
typically marketing gets to have a big, awesome AI initiative, but not
Yeah.
HR.
Yeah.
HR just has to implement and stress
Yeah.
about like what happens to these jobs. Um, so I we had 40 people from one of the conglomerates in the Philippines come take this training course with us. And some of the people coming in were a little bit wary and a little bit conscious of how is this not just going to be a replacement for me? So in particular, this one lady in marketing was pretty concerned because she was thinking, if my organization starts using AI for marketing, does that mean my job is over? You know, I'm going to be replaced by AI. And the really interesting thing is, after she was very came in very intimidated, and after 3 days, it turns out that this lady was the one who was writing the most creative AI prompts because of her background as
Wow.
a writer. She was the one creating the most brilliant, creative, funny, almost like mischievous and like unheard of AI applications. Whereas the people from the analytics team were just writing like very straightforward, like, okay, give me factual responses to this. Okay, read this policy manual and like tell me what's inside of this.
Yeah.
This person was coming up with like make puns, like make jokes. Here's
Oh,
like
that's so
make like
nice.
a make an AI make a conversational AI model that always what was one like
Always
college
responds with a dad joke, perhaps, you know?
always responds with a dad joke, unhelpful. Like, give me an AI, give me like a really funny AI that answers all HR questions unhelpfully in as least helpful way as possible. And what I could see afterwards is that she said the creativity that this allows me and the
Mm,
knowledge that I don't actually have to. I think previous trainings, she thought she would have to learn how to code, and she was actually like, I can't code. I'm really bad at coding. Not everyone can learn how to code. So here, she just realized that if I can basically promote myself to being a creative director, running a team of AI marketing agents mentally, then my execution capabilities and creative capabilities are much bigger. Before, how did you say it? Before, I had the feeling that I was a writer doer. Now I
mm,
have a feeling that I'm like an editor director. So
wow.
that level of optimism and happiness that
Yeah.
she had at the end of our work together made me
Yeah.
really happy. And I think in the Philippines, we have a lot of people who work
Mm,
in these writing heavy use cases, doing a lot of data entry tasks. I
yeah.
think this is our way to, like this is our way to excel at the next level of the game. 40, 50 years ago, South Korea, they were they didn't have much, right? Like there was no and now Samsung is one of the biggest companies in the world.
Mm,
Korea started by doing steel manufacturing, doing a lot of low end manufacturing, and they figured out their way to high end
mm,
manufacturing. And now like K-pop has eaten the world. Half the
yeah.
people in the Philippines can speak
Yeah.
Korean because of K-pop. So the
Yeah.
Philippines right now is a place where we are we're I think the services backbone of a lot of the world.
Yeah.
And this might be our way if we can figure out this technology. I want people to feel optimistic about thinking like, okay, what is this? What does Samsung look like for us? What does K-pop look like for us
Mm,
from where we are today, where we're manufacturing
mm,
steel, right?
yeah. That's such a that's such an optimistic way to look at it, really, because like I was just speaking to another podcast host the other day, because I was on a panel, and one of the questions that was asked was really that I could almost replace all my junior engineers, like if this gets more powerful, I think I can do it. So what happens then, right? Does it mean that fresh grads will be even more tougher to get jobs and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff?
I think it might honestly. No, that's really fair because fresh grads, creativity will be more rewarded across the board. I think the uniqueness and creativity will be more rewarded because execution capability is increased with this, but creativity is not increased by this.
Yeah.
Um, but like you started at Accenture, right? And like they take a lot of juniors and they train them. And I'm
Yeah.
also thinking about thinking machines where I take a lot of juniors and train them. If I don't need quite as many juniors,
Yeah.
what does it unlock for our organization, and we have to change the way our organization runs. Otherwise, yeah, there is no point in having more juniors unless we change the business model. So that's a big question mark right now.
Yeah. To me, I think I took the more optimistic, because I mean it was on stage, right? So I took the more optimistic way of answering the question, and I think it's true, right? Although I don't have the experience in the thick and thin like you, I would love to kind of hear your response as well, because to me, I'm thinking like it's exactly what you mentioned around how the way we, I guess the measuring stick is different now, right? The way we measure is different now, right? Because to me, my answer at that point of time was that you now then allow you're now then required to make the fresh graduates, the junior employees, think higher level stuff, more complex stuff, right? And unfortunately, being fresh grads, your salary is not as high, meaning to say you may be able to actually then deliver services at a higher level, right? At a so-called quote unquote lower cost, for example, because then you're taking the balance of helping them to think more strategically. You're developing their skill sets, and then at the same time, you can afford to hire more people, right? Because they are then able to perform at the same level because everybody is AI powered, right? So then you can do more with the same. That's my answer. Obviously, I'm not sure it practically
Optimistic.
will work out that way.
I don't know, right? It's really tough to think about how the world of work is going to change.
For sure, yeah.
It's really tough because what are we going to do with the productivity gains? Where are we going to put the productivity gains? That's also my question. Are we going to offer? Is just like, are we going to offer more for less? Are we going to be able to push these productivity gains into doing things that are usually the ROI before was too low? So, okay, perfect example, right? To train a machine learning chat model, a really high quality conversational chat model that can do just-in-time training for different types of manager scenarios, the cost benefit like completely was not there. Like you could spend a huge amount of time and money training one model at a time to handle one type of conversation at a time, but it was just not worth it unless you had like 20,000 people working in your organization. But now with LLM Labs, it's like you just need like 4 hours of an HR person's time to craft each scenario. And so you don't, that's like way less than like 12 weeks of a full machine learning team's time. So I think we can put a lot more of our spare effort and energy now into things that used to be difficult, that are now easier, that are still valuable to people. So I hope, fingers crossed, that's the direction, instead of just squeezing everybody to death from every angle.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm quite optimistic about how, like, because we find so much benefit in this and in this technology, we won't let it fail, so to speak, because there's a lot of doom and gloom, right? In terms of how like it's gonna spit out so much fake news, it's gonna bankrupt the internet and stuff like that. But then I feel like because this is important enough for us not to screw up. I feel, and I think the I guess the advocates behind the usage of all this wouldn't allow it to happen. At least that's my perspective.
Well, do you think people are inherently good or inherently bad?
I think they're inherently good. I have a 1-year-old, and I look at him when he wakes up, he smiles, he laughs, and all that. He's just curious, and how can that be inherently bad? I find it really impossible. Okay, call me biased, but I find it really hard to believe.
That's a great answer. I believe in people. I think that people. I believe that people have the capacity for empathy, and sometimes when people behave, there are some people who are not good people, but I think as a whole, people's capacity for empathy is really high. What people are, though, is they're also lazy. I think people are good, but I think basically they're lazy. Yeah.
So many ChatGPT copy and paste, and you realize that
you
can tell. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So where I am worried about is more about even that people will be exactly a student will copy ChatGPT, copy paste, and send to professor instead of even though their intention is to study hard and do well, they're either lazy or they're busy because life is really life is just full of like it's just like full of things that they will go ahead and start to use AI tools as a crutch instead of as a tool. Like instead of using it like a tool to express yourself, you just fully outsource all your intellectual capacity and capabilities to this. And so that's what I'm more worried about, that if people start doing that, we're going to
Like
end
an
up
easy way
stupid.
out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I really enjoyed our conversation, and you know, we're kind of close to the hour already as well. I wanted to, you know, before we go off, I wanted to really just, you know, get everybody to go check out Thinking Machines, right? So Steph, if they are interested, you know, about finding out more and the type of stuff that you guys do, you know, where can they find you, and you know, share a little bit more about what you guys do to be able to help businesses as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for giving me a quick moment to do an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Jim. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Thinking Machines is a data and AI consulting team. We're primarily in Thailand, Singapore, and Manila, and we've been helping a lot of bigger organizations. So if you are in a bigger organization that's trying to figure out data transformation, that needs like holistic needs, from like data engineering to AI to building AI models to building now large language models and figuring out the interface change management side of it, we're really good at taking people through that whole transformation journey. We've also been doing a lot of work in accelerating climate and sustainability efforts through data and technology. So we've been building a lot of technology for organizations like UNICEF Innovation Fund, Climate Smart Shrimp, Conservation International. So if you have, we're partners with Gold Standard. We're helping them build their global digital registry for all their carbon projects. So if you're either a large organization trying to figure out your data and large language model transformation, please reach out to us. Or if you're a climate organization who has like something that's kind of working, and technology and data can help you scale that up, we have a whole team that's specialized in working in developing countries, and with all the data sets and all the data issues that we have when working with unreliable, poorly cataloged geospatial data in the Southeast Asian region. So if those problems resonate with you, please look us up. I think we're pretty easy to
1-800
Google.
data science.
1-800 Thinking Machines Data Science. We're also super fun, high energy team to be working with. And yeah, we love making the future happen. Our little tagline internally is we take science fiction. We're in the business of turning science fiction into reality.
Oh wow, that's so cool. Yeah, that's really fun. I can personally vouch for the team at Thinking Machines. You know, we worked on one project, but hey, it was really fun working with the team. Steph, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a super fun conversation.
Thanks for inviting me.